deception, conservative victories,
Come on, about Cheney!
lost opportunities, revolution, failure, and finally hope. The story begins in 1976 when my father, Ron Paul, was elected to Congress. He won a special election. 13,000 votes was all it needed to win a race because it was a special election. A small group of people can do something in our country still. How long did it take Ron Paul, once he got to Washington, to stir things up? The first week he met in the White House with Gerald Ford. The second week he endorsed Ronald Reagan. That didn't endear him too well. Only 4 Republican congressmen endorsed Ronald Reagan in 1976, and Ron Paul was one of those. We went to the convention in Kansas City that year, and it was one of the closest conventions of the last century. Reagan didn't win. They didn't forget Ron Paul. He came back and campaigned for Ron Paul in 1978. My father won an election by 1,000 votes this time out of 200,000 cast. The election was getting bigger. We then fast forward to 1980 and the Reagan Revolution. Reagan wins in a landslide. He incorporates Southern Democrats, conservative Democrats, people who said they believed in limited government, lower taxes, balancing the budget. Well, did we get some good things? Yeah, we did get some good things. We got lowered marginal tax rates. And when we lowered marginal tax rates, what happened? This is still very important because people still confuse this. Revenues actually went up. So the supply siders were right. Tax revenues went up. But what happened to the deficit? The deficit went through the roof under Reagan. So how long did it take Ron Paul to figure out that the guy he had liked, endorsed, campaigned for, and campaigned for him? The very first budget. Ron Paul voted no against the very first Reagan budget. All the boll weevils, everybody lauded this great budget. It was $100 billion in debt. This was 3 times greater than Jimmy Carter's worst deficit. So Ron Paul was true to his founding and saying, I don't believe in unbalanced budgets. I think we need to reduce the size and scope of government. So he voted no. How much guts does it take to vote no as a Republican congressman against a popular Republican president? He was the only one, I think. Only a handful at very most would vote no against these budgets. He continued that throughout the 80s. He was discouraged by the fact that the revolution never really came to its fruition. In the early 1990s, we jumped forward, and 1994 we have another so-called revolution. We have a Republican revolution where they take over the House and the Senate. And we think good things are coming again, the things that Reagan had promised that never did. Get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of the Department of Energy, reduce the size and scope of government. Republicans ran on the same platform. Well, what happened? The same thing. Republicans got in power and got sick with power. Within 2 months, we had transportation bills that were much worse than the Democrats ever gave us. The Democrats would load on 400 earmarks on the transportation bill. Republicans would load 4,000 earmarks on there. They built a bridge to an island that had 50 people. You could have bought everybody a Learjet on that island off the Alaskan coast for what it cost to build the bridge. Republicans loaded up the goodies for all their districts. Instead of the Democrats doing it, the Republicans did the same thing. To give you an example of what it's like to be Ron Paul in Washington, one of those early Republican budgets, Gingrich is in the Republican caucus. This is just Republicans, it's closed door, and Gingrich is exhorting everyone, saying, there's something in this budget for every one of you. Meaning there's pork in the budget for your district, your district, your district, and I expect you to vote for it. That's the way it works. I gave you all pork. You got it, the Democrats didn't get it. We're in power. And he said, there's only one person in this room, you just need it. There's only one person in this room I give an exemption to, and that's Ron Paul. So Gingrich acknowledged that Ron Paul is exempt from this because Ron Paul was going to vote his principles, and he always voted against the budget deficit every time.
Yeah, but they were my best.
So then we skip forward and we're up to 2000 now. We get to the year 2000. It's supposed to be the completion of the revolution. We now have the election of George W. Bush. We have a Republican House, a Republican Senate. It's supposed to be great things to come. All the principles of limited government, lower taxation, all these things are going to come into play now. How long did it take Ron Paul until he figured out there was a problem? Not very long. George W.'s first budget was $200 billion in debt, and they went up from there. They're now over $500 billion a year. George Bush has added at least $2 trillion to the debt, and maybe more. We've heard some people say $5 billion. There's a lot of different ways to add up the deficit, but it's a huge amount that's been added under the supposed oversight of the Republicans. So then you scratch your head and you say, well, he's had a $2 trillion. What is $1 trillion? Anybody conceive of $1 trillion? Can you even conceive of $1 billion? Well, I heard something recently I thought was good. 1 billion seconds ago was 1959. 1 billion minutes ago, Jesus was alive. 1 billion hours ago was the Stone Age. $1 billion ago, the rate they spend it in Washington was 8 hours and 20 minutes. They spend $1 billion every 8 hours and 20 minutes, and that's just ridiculous. But is it because the message is wrong? No, I think a lot of them still have the message. You hear the message here of a lot of people who are for limited government, or say they are. But none of them have the guts to stand up and do it. And I think you know from Ron Paul's history, he has the guts to oppose the tide, the guts to vote no when it's right. When George W. was elected, I have a lot of friends who are Republican. I'm a Republican. I look at him and I say, you know what? George W. has made Bill Clinton look like a fiscal conservative.
Yeah.
During George W.'s administration, we've completed and greatly exacerbated the federalization of education with the No Child Left Behind.
Amen again!
The Department of Education has doubled. We were supposed to believe in the elimination of the Department of Education. George W. Bush has doubled the size and doubled the number of employees and taken away control from states and localities. Under George W., we also added socialized prescription drug plans for senior citizens. Now it's hard to say, oh, what about senior citizens? But you know the truth of it is, actually, this isn't true for everyone. If you look at the statistics, you know what the richest group of people in the United States is? I'm not saying everybody's a billionaire, but if you look at all the statistics, those who are retired are the richest generation we've ever had. But anyway, that's beside the point. The answer is not to socialize things with federal drugs. It was supposed to cost $400 billion. It ended up morphing. It's going to cost over $1 trillion. And finally, the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq has cost now $1 trillion, and there's no end in sight if we keep Bush or any of the followers of Bush in power. $1 trillion, and more importantly, 3,600 young men and women have died, 50,000 have been injured. This is all to attack a country that had no capability of attacking us. It was questioned whether they had even the ability anymore to attack their neighbors because they'd been pummeled for 10 years and been under sanctions for 10 years. And most importantly, had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. No connection at all to 9/11. In 30 years in public life, my father's voted for the use of force one time, and he did vote to go into Afghanistan. And he did think that there was something we had to do about the people who attacked us, and we had to disrupt that. And he would have fought to the finish. He probably would have allowed the army to go all the way into Pakistan to get Bin Laden, and it would have been done with it. Or at least that part of it would have been done with it. But he never would have gone into Iraq, and we're creating more terrorists there than we are by killing the ones that we find.
Right.
Is there any reason at the end of this? I said this is a sad story. I think in the end there finally is hope. The hope is hearing the applause out here and knowing that I think Ron Paul's going to straw poll here in New Hampshire today.
Yeah!
I truly believe, and I don't say this just to be Pollyanna, I truly believe that we could win New Hampshire. The power of the internet is extraordinary. Groups are popping up everywhere. Meetup groups pop up spontaneously. Someone was joking here about we don't really run the campaign that people do. It's true. People have their own websites. They've got their own shirts, their signs. In the end, it used to be people all wait for the campaign to do things for them. Our people are very independent. They do their own thing. And that's great. In New Hampshire, 20% of the vote might win the election. There'll be 200,000 to 300,000 people vote in the Republican primary. 40,000 to 50,000 votes might win. So I think when you get to smaller numbers, when you get a little bit away from 1 billion, you can get your mind around something you can do. We're going to come back here September 29th and 30th. We're going to walk the 29th in Manchester and the 30th in Concord. Our hope is to have 1,000 volunteers. We've got at least 20 family members coming, and we're hoping to get 1,000 volunteers. We'd like to knock on, 10,000 doors. And I think we can do it.
Yeah!
Thanks very much for coming out, and I know I have about 80 more minutes, but I'm going to cut it off.